morning. This is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Pepper Master, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Good morning and hello, kids, and welcome to season 4 and episode number 480 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show here on the Crier Media Network. Yeah! Today, recording day is Monday, September 30th, 2020. Wow. Let's try that again. September 30th, 2024. I tripped right over my tongue there, kids and cubs. And it looks like it's going to be a decent day here at the Beaver Lodge. I'm your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver A. And with me is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. A big thank you goes to our podcast's founding sponsors, the Pepper Master, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, and CanadianTarot.com. We're going to have a special day here at the Beaver Lodge because, as you can see, my light makes it look a little red, but we are wearing our orange shirts. Mr. Grizzly actually has ones for the day specifically, which I'm hoping to find at some point so I can have one myself for the show. But I do want to buy it from an organization or a retailer where the funds will go there. So I want to make a conscious purchase when I do that. Mr. Grizzly, how is your mental health today, sir?
I didn't sleep well last night. My stomach's upset, and I've got computer issues. Not this computer, another computer. It's not. Things aren't going properly, and that's how my head is right now.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah, exactly what it is.
Oh man! Before we start, a little bit of a celebration here because it is Kit Argosy Acres' birthday.
Oh, cool!
Should pull up my
Happy
best
birthday.
Marilyn. Happy birthday to you. Anyway, you know how the rest of the song goes. And Kit Dan deserves some congratulations because it seems that he has been invited and accepted a debate scheduled for October 29th. It seems that the debate will be principally, or if not totally, on housing and homelessness. So, I mean, who better? Right?
Experience.
Yes. Now, it appears he was also blocked from the first debate, but I think it was one organized by the Liberal Party or something that's affiliated with the Liberal Party. And I guess they had a certain number of slots and they sent out a questionnaire and determined that Dan did not make the cut there, unfortunately. But my advice in that case is attend to the debate, note to the questions, note elements of responses that you might want to respond to, and then go home and then turn on the video and say, I didn't get to participate in the debate. Here's the first question. This is what I would have answered. There you go. If you could try to keep yourself to the same amount of time that they had in the debate, if there was like a time limit, that makes it all the better. But you don't have to, right? You didn't make the rules. You get to answer the questions after everyone else. Take the time you need. So there's always a way to participate. There's always a way to participate now. But yes, it's not the same as being in the room and having the parry and thrust and the people that are in the room, which clearly, if you show up for a debate, you're a highly motivated voter and therefore more likely to vote than just putting it on, the web overall for everyone to see. But, we do what we can with what we have. So that's the way that you use the tools that you have to spin a negative into a positive and make it work for you, my friend. All right. Just a little free PR advice there. I used to be very good at what I did. All right. Mr. Grizzly. It was a slow news day for Canada, which is good. Problem is that it was an extremely turbulent one internationally. And we will get to that later today as well. So I just don't want you to think that we've forgotten that. But today, specifically, it's the 4th annual National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And one thing I always say is that even though we have a day for it, September 30th, every day is a good day for some truth and reconciliation. Right?
Indeed.
Hopefully we can all agree on that. Because there's some people who are not. There are some people. I saw this guy again, this Harrison Faulkner guy, who's associated with the True North and all.
Yeah.
And he's a big residential school denialist.
Yes. Yeah.
Big time. So you're going to have a day like this where fair-minded, decent people who have empathy and who
humanity, compassion,
who care about the fact that we have done something wrong in the past and would really like it if our nation took the steps that were needed to be taken to not erase the past because it can't, and not assuage our guilt because this is not supposed to be done for that purpose. It's not supposed to be done to make us feel better. It's not about us, but to make it so that if we are going to share this place together, that we can both go forward with love and respect and honoring each other, as was originally intended. It's a path forward. But in order to have a clear path forward, you have to admit and face what was done. You have to own it. You have to be honest about it. That's the truth. And then you have to want to make it better. That's the reconciliation. And it's hard work. And it's long work. Because, let me describe it. Let's say you're in a relationship and your partner is unfaithful.
Mm-hmm.
Decide that you are still going to continue the relationship. There's a crack in the mirror of trust.
Indeed.
And no matter how long you are together, that crack will always be there. And you will always see it. Now, you can move beyond that. Yes, but the relationship becomes something different than it was before that moment. right? It has to become something different. So if we transpose this and say trust was broken, and it was broken for a very, very long time, still is being broken in many ways, and has been broken in every possible way you can imagine. That's a lot of cracks in the mirror.
Well, and
to like decide that you're going to look past, right? So on this day and leading up to this day, that the Harrison Faulkners of the world, for whom everything has to be about them, is I have some type of right to go through this entire life without feeling guilt or shame for anything. I can just say whatever I want and I can do whatever I want and I can feel that I'm entitled to everything and that everybody else that has something going on, well, they're either lazy or just got to get over it, or that demographic, that they are very, very active and have been very active in the lead up to this and are going to be extremely active today, and that everybody for whom this day is for, they are actually going to try and counter program and pull focus away from them. And that the people for whom this day is for, hopefully they all take a social media break today, because that's the last thing they need today. But that these people are going to try to put this stuff in their face and rub their noses on it on this day makes it all the more important that the rest of us actually take some time to listen. And not just listen.
Learn.
Right? There's hearing, there's listening, there's actively listening. Right? You got these three levels. Active listening is not a passive thing, right? It's called active listening. You're there, you are present, you are engaged. Your eyes are open, your ears are open, your spirit is open, your soul is open, and you are trying to take in as much as you can. So that if you have an opportunity to say something, if it is an opportunity for you to say something, because sometimes it's not, you actually have something meaningful to say that comes from a good place. It's all the more important that we do that, considering all the crap that's going to be out there. I'm just, man.
Well, consider this.
Yes.
This is Truth and Reconciliation Day in Canada. Just a few days ago, Pierre Poilievre was a guest speaker at a residential school denier and Christian nationalist event along with Harper and Smith. The media is ignoring the worst of Pierre Poilievre and conservatives.
Okay.
Alberta's toasting Ted Byfield.
Now, this is the third time for Pierre Poilievre. On the day of Harper's alleged apology, as we mentioned often on this show, he ran off to CFRA to complain about not getting value for money for tort settlements, and that Indigenous people living in Canada need to develop a better work ethic, and that it was up to, I guess, the Anglo-Saxons to foster that in them somehow.
Well,
then on the day that the Pope came to Canada to deliver the apology, that's the day he announced he was running for prime minister, which, as Mr. Grizzly says, you can't do because we don't have that electoral system yet. But that was the day he counter-programmed that on that very day. Now, the day before, the 4th National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, he goes to this place to hear this guy. I'm guessing he spoke as well?
I don't know. I think he was scheduled to speak. I don't know if he did.
Boy. He's showing you who he is, man. When
Well,
there's a
it says
significant
all-star speaker lineup. So
okay. Whenever there's a significant event, he always makes time to, either on the day or just before it, to send a little signal to the residential school deniers.
Corey Morgan being one of them.
That's a name I'm unaware of, and I guess if you brought him up, he said something, and I'm going to not be better for it. There we go. Yeah.
Those schools kidnapped and abused and killed children at those schools and then destroyed the records. Corey Morgan. Totally untrue. There was no genocide in Canada. Death count at Kamloops residential school site remains at 0. Glad to represent the Truth and Reconciliation Day approaches.
Even if what he said was true about the Kamloops residential school, that is one among how many?
Yeah.
It didn't happen at this one, so it didn't happen at all. It didn't happen while I was awake to witness it, so it didn't happen at all. What do you mean it happened? That was before I was born. How am I supposed to know what happened before I was born?
So, Corey Morgan is a columnist and show host at the Western Standard Online News.
Oh, of course. Of course. Because of course.
Yes.
Right. So it appears that there have been some discussions about making...
Well, I'm just going to put him up on the screen here. So anybody wants to follow him on Twitter, it's at Corey B. Morgan.
Why would we want to follow him on Twitter?
Well, if you want to go and give him a piece of your mind.
I don't like suggesting that all that much.
No, people are free to do whatever they want. I'm not suggesting anything. I said if you want to go and give him a piece of your mind. I didn't say do it. You could say that's stochastic, but if they can do it, why can't we? Yeah, I know. Sometimes you got to get into the ditch, though.
I understand. Not sure that's what I say, because democracy is something that you do. That's the kind of democracy I want. Wanting to be
fair.
Pushing. But yes.
But if somebody is going to spew hatred like he does.
Yes, that there's no free speech without consequence.
This is what I'm getting at.
As we say on the show.
You dish it out, you better be able to take it.
Yeah. That part is true. You got to own what you say, and once you put it out there, it's like, you got to expect some. It's like playing tennis, right? No matter how good the shot you make and it goes across the other net and bounces in, you can't just say, oh, I made a great shot, and then stop and think, I've got this one, because it can always come back. So, yeah. It's 4th day for National Truth and Reconciliation, also known as Orange Shirt Day. It's a day to honor Indigenous children who were forced to attend residential schools and to remember those who never made it home. There's a lady named Phyllis Webstat who has been traveling the country for 11 years to share her journey through the residential school system. She had entered when she was 6, and she went to the St. Joseph Mission Residential School near Williams Lake, British Columbia, I believe. And on her first day there, she had a gift from her grandmother, which was an orange shirt. And it was taken from her on the first day of school, making her feel like she didn't matter. Quote, "What I want to do is not only be able to tell my story, but I want to hear the stories of survivors and their families. To meet people." End quote. So there's going to be a lot of people sharing today.
I'll be right back.
Online, in other forum. Now, unless we are making the effort to go to other fora and hear for ourselves today, we probably won't be affected by those a lot. But online, if we're on there, we're going to see it too, right? If you make any expression of solidarity today, chances are some of it's going to come your way, right? So this is a day, again, how would I put it? If you're going to respond, this is my personal, the way I go about it. I respond to what is said, yes, but not for the benefit of the person to whom I'm speaking or with whom I'm interacting in this case, because odds are they are so far gone and they've come to social media to keyboard warrior. So clearly they are not opening to having their minds changed here. And as good a debater as I can be and as good a writer as I can be, um, I would have to have magical skills to be able to write within 280 characters something that would make somebody stop and go, wow, you're right. My whole perspective has changed. Right? It's a little bit of a futile experience. However, there might be other people that stumble upon that conversation who are not necessarily clear. And if they see the call, which is the troll BS, and the response, but written, of course, for the benefit of the people. So basically, you use their timeline in order to be able to drop knowledge or education or the sense that, yeah, there are way many more of us who feel that we should take the compassion route here. Right? I do it with that intent and with that motivation. And then that mute and that block button sure come in handy. Because ain't nobody got time. Today's a day for listening, not a day for battling or fighting or all of that stuff. So, drop a little truth, use the mute button, use the block button, stop that stuff right there. No time for it. That is my best advice for that. It's, how would I put it? It saddens me because I feel this in a certain way. It has to be way more visceral, I would assume. But it's this, I would assume that it's a little bit the same feeling for me when Pride Day gets hijacked. Except I wasn't put in a residential school, right? But rainbow people are also persecuted, right? And also have, a history of deadly encounters with law enforcement, and also have a history of people just hating you for who you are. There are many points on which we can connect on an empathy level, if not on a personal experience level. On that front, we know a little bit how it feels. But it's on a whole other scale when it comes to Canada's Indigenous community. It's just on a whole other scale. So that days like this bring about so much hate. is something to which I'm particularly sensitive, which is why I'm asking you not to use this day to fight if you're going to do anything, but to just educate, leave some knowledge, and not try to. Each individually, we don't have the power, right, to not make the fight the focus of the day. There is a fight to be had today and every day, but it's not that one, right? It's the fight to actually get us to a place where we're dealing nation to nation, where we coexist in mutual respect. That's the fight. That's the struggle. That's the path. And hopefully, all the naysayers, once they see us doing the work and getting somewhere, maybe that will create the bandwagon effect. Rather than trying to solve their problem now, how about we actually focus on the problem? And maybe that way, other people will come along. Yeah, Frankie, misery and hate love company. Oh boy, you are right on that. Now, there have been a few things that have happened over the past couple of days in the lead up to this. One of the things that have happened is that the Canadian Medical Society had issued an apology.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have it?
This was about, I think this had happened last week, made an apology to Indigenous peoples. And in The Conversation, which is a place that I like very much, you have some good quality journalism and opinion sharing in this one. There is a person named Marcia Anderson, who's the assistant professor of the Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Manitoba. And she said this: on September 18th, I was on the traditional territory of the Songhees, and I do not know how this word is pronounced, unfortunately. It is spelled XWSEPSUM. So I will not even attempt to know. But that was the other nation. So on the territory of the Songhees and this nation, to stand with my Indigenous physician family as the Canadian Medical Association delivered its apology to Indigenous peoples in Victoria, British Columbia. This wasn't the first time that we have stood together to witness a collective apology. In June 2008, many of us were at a gathering of the Pacific Region Indigenous Doctors Congress in Kauai, Hawaii. Our hosts ensured that we had time and space to watch Prime Minister Stephen Harper issue an apology on behalf of Canada to Indigenous peoples for Indian residential schools. As Harper said sorry for the federal government's attempt to, quote, kill the Indian in the child, Canadians had a range of reactions from ignorance to collective humility to ongoing residential school denialism. That day, we hoped the apology signaled a turning point and that a new day was coming. What we've seen since, as evidenced by multiple reports on progress on reconciliation, is that it takes a long time for that new day to come, and progress on reparations and reconciliation is not linear or always forward-moving. I carried the lessons from that 2008 experience with me to Victoria to witness the apology from CMA, Canada's National Association of Physicians, and knew this would be different for me. My experiences of racism in the healthcare system are significantly more direct than my experiences of residential schools. I navigated medical education as a Cree Anishinaabe woman, experiencing significant amounts of both non-malicious and malicious racism. This ranged from being asked if there were polar bears where I grew up, the north end of Winnipeg, to being asked by an attending emergency room physician if I had to, quote, jump out of the Indian posse to transfer from Winnipeg to Saskatoon. I have experienced racism when seeking healthcare myself, like when a training physician commented on my reading ability, even though I was already a practicing physician and national Indigenous health leader. And when my father needed emergency care while having a massive heart attack. What would this collective apology for systemic racism in healthcare mean to me, an Indigenous physician who has had and continues to experience racism from my physician peers? So when the CMA said, quote, "We are deeply ashamed for the deplorable racism that Indigenous patients and healthcare providers face," I wondered who was included in that we. Does the ER physician whose behavior escalated to include putting his hand on the back pocket of my jeans when I was on call to both grope me and, quote, "check if I had stolen their reflex hammer," feel deep shame? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
And that disconnect impacted how the apology landed. Within, quote, "the national voice of the medical profession are those of us who have experienced and continue to experience anti-Indigenous racism, those we work with in consensual solidarity or allyship to dismantle white supremacy within the profession, and those who are actively perpetuating the spread of false and harmful anti-Indigenous stereotypes that contribute to the unequal healthcare we receive. Many of these behaviors are described in British Columbia's In Plain Sight report. A collective apology cannot speak to this range of experiences or contributions to harm. As racism operates at multiple levels, so must accountability. This is why on the day of the apology, I was apprehensive and feeling somewhat pressured to respond positively to it to make a show of unity. Since the apology hadn't really spoken to the breadth and depth of experiences of racism I've had or that I know many of my Indigenous physician colleagues have had, I was not ready for that. I suspected some of my colleagues felt the same. After the apology was delivered in a small group that included many of the Indigenous physicians who were there, I shared my feelings. I said, quote, "An apology has been offered. Whatever your reaction is to what was said today is valid. You don't have to accept this apology today, tomorrow, or ever. It's okay to wait and see what comes next." I saw people nodding and tears being shed. I sat with that feeling, and then a couple of days later, I was reading Cole Arthur Riley's This Here Flesh. Riley is a Black American author and founder of the incredibly popular Black Liturgies Instagram account. Her writing of Black liberations and the reparations needed for the transatlantic slave trade and other injustices strongly parallel the need for Canada's ongoing truth and reconciliation work, which we will be recognizing on September 30th. This passage from This Here Flesh resonated with me when reflecting on this latest apology. Quote, "There are some of us who have grown weary of talk of reconciliation. This is probably because it comes to us on the tongues of men who have paid no time to the process of true repair. It is both ego and shame concealed in shallow unity speak that regresses any progress that has been made." Wow. That lands.
Yeah.
Whew. Okay. Anti-Indigenous racism is embedded across and within all institutions of the Canadian state, and the medical profession is no different. Based on the fallout after the Indian residential school apology, we can accurately predict the actions following this apology will not be linear with forward progress. As Indigenous physicians, we know both ourselves and our relatives are vulnerable to ongoing harms while the organizational level actions unfold. If we are hesitant to fully accept this most recent apology, it is because we have learned the hard way that our safety, and sometimes our survival, depends on first seeing the integrity of the other party we are in union with. This is a deep social contract between the medical profession and the public we serve. There is an individual contract between each physician and each patient they see. There is also a contract between physicians as colleagues, teachers, and learners, embedded in our modern-day physician's pledge. This apology is meaningful because it addresses a tragic breach between the medical profession and the public. The CMA has committed to follow-up actions. This, however, does not offer true repair for the past breaches and the ones still to come. In all of these contracts, that is a gap that remains to be closed, and without it, we will not see the end of anti-Indigenous racism in healthcare.
That's heavy.
That's heavy.
So is this.
But truth.
This is from APTN.
Today, the national organization overseeing doctors in Canada is asking for forgiveness at a ceremony in downtown Victoria.
The racism and discrimination that Indigenous peoples and healthcare providers face is deplorable. and we are deeply ashamed. As the national voice of the medical profession, we are sorry for the actions and the inactions of physicians, residents, and medical students that have harmed Indigenous peoples.
Dr. Alika Fontaine is the former president of the Canadian Medical Association and says this day is an important first step.
After years of internal work, the CMA is sharing and owning its history. We recognize this apology may reopen wounds and re-traumatize First Nation, Inuit, and Métis individuals, families, and communities who have and continue to experience harms in Canada's healthcare system.
And according to this report called In Plain Sight, done in 2020 in BC, 84% of 9,000 Indigenous people and Indigenous healthcare workers say they experienced some type of racism and discrimination that prevented them from seeking necessary care, negatively affecting their health. These outcomes reinforce stereotypes and perpetuate the cycle of inequity. In 2022, the CMA brought on Indigenous elders, knowledge keepers, and experts to help the organization define an Indigenous health goal. This led to them reviewing its past and acknowledging the harms Indigenous people suffered, dating back to the establishment of residential schools and Indian hospitals.
The Indian hospital system embedded systemic racism and discrimination in the Canadian health system by fostering racial segregation and conditions where Indigenous patients received substandard and unsafe care. Patients were subjected to abuse, experimental treatments, and forced and coerced sterilization.
Dr. Nell Wyman says she is hopeful things will change, but there is a lot of work to do.
I'm more interested in hearing what's going to happen now, what's going to happen starting tomorrow. And I think a major driver of trying to make the healthcare system does not lie within the Indigenous physicians like myself within the system. We've been speaking up for years about how unsafe it is for patients and for ourselves, for Indigenous medical students, residents, and physicians. I think really the onus and accountability will lie with our non-Indigenous physician colleagues to take up that cause.
Tina House, APTN National News, Victoria.
Wow, thanks for that, Mr. Grizzly. Appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
I love it when we can show APTN's work. Yeah, see the comments from the kids here. Jesus fucking Christ. There was no system in this country where Indigenous people were not harmed. Every single one of them needs to change.
Mhm.
At PNC Bio, that's fucking tragic.
Well, and let's not forget the story that we brought to attention on this show about a year ago for a woman in Montreal who filmed her last moments. The horrible treatment she received in hospital and died in hospital in Montreal. They refused her treatment. They sent her away. She died as a result of their ineptitude and attitude. I'm unfortunately, I don't recall her name, but we talked about this last year when it happened. Last year or the year before? I can't remember when it happened. Too many concussions. But this is still going on today in 2024. So we have a lot of bloody work to do.
Mm-hmm. It's I remember there was the lady Joyce Echaquan.
Yes.
That was about 4 years ago, I believe now. I think, but I'm not sure if that's the same person you're speaking of, Mr. Grizzly.
3 years. Oh, you're right. It is 4 years. We did, hospital.
She was in it was not in Montreal, but in the Lanaudière region.
Apologies.
Yeah. So that's why I was a little confused there.
Yeah.
But yeah, 4 years ago, 2 days ago, 4 years ago, 2 days ago, Joyce Echaquan, who is an Atikamekw woman, live streamed a video showing how staff at a Joliette, Quebec hospital were treating her while she lay dying. In the video, the 37-year-old could be heard screaming in distress, as well as employees insulting and hurling racist remarks at her.
Yeah, in the video, Echaquan recorded the orderly is heard saying, "What would your children think seeing you like this?" And later, he made bad choices. So this was recorded on Joyce Echequan's Facebook Live video. She live streamed her death, basically.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
2020 this happened, right?
Yeah. There have been a couple of changes in that area. This was from June. It's something I had noted, but I didn't have an opportunity to bring on the show, so it comes along now. There's a mobile clinic by and for Indigenous people that probably is now treating patients across Quebec's Lanaudière region, which is the region where this happened. It comes 4 years after the death of Joyce Echequan, who filmed staff at the Joliet Hospital hurling racist abuse at her. And this was from a report by Alison Northcott at CBC. There's a brand new van that's been outfitted with an exam table, medical supplies. And Jennifer Brazo, who works with this mobile unit, says, we have a space where our nurse or doctors will be able to treat patients that come and visit our mobile clinic as head As head of the region's Native Friendship Center at this clinic, so it's linked with the Native Friendship Center there. So it's because, it is by and for Indigenous people. So they're using the Friendship Center in order to help coordinate this. And they say it will be a crucial link to help the healthcare system for Indigenous patients in urban areas in Quebec. They say, I believe that we're the first Indigenous for and by Indigenous people mobile clinic. It will travel to different municipalities in Quebec's Lanaudière region, offering access to doctors, nurses, education, and intervention workers. Brazo also says to be able to go towards the people where they are and make sure that they have the services that they need, and also considering we're in such a large region, it makes a lot of the services inaccessible for a huge portion of the population. The death of Echequan highlighted the insecurities that Indigenous people feel when they're accessing services in the region. And so they felt that they needed to take some action to ensure cultural safety for Indigenous people when accessing health services. A member of Joyce Echequan's family, Lorena Echequan, was there at the launch of this unit, offering homemade bannock and blueberries to anyone who was coming in. Joyce was her cousin and best friend, and she says that the mobile clinic will really help the off-reserve Indigenous community at Tacoma community build trust in the healthcare system, and which has been hard to do since the passing of Echequan. She says that she would have liked a clinic like this when her 6 kids were young and she was trying to navigate healthcare.
It's been 4 years and almost nothing has been done now.
No. And the thing that's been done is Indigenous-led.
Yes. As the community is still waiting for some kind of movement, action that will provide some closure, especially for the close relatives of Joyce Echequan and her community of Manawan. All of that lies in the hands of the government. Now, Bill 32 has been presented, requires healthcare workers to adopt a cultural safety approach and be more inclusive when interacting with Indigenous patients. Introduced last year by La Flanière, the bill is currently being studied by a committee at the National Assembly. Premier Francois, see if I can speak. I'm having a hard time this morning. Premier Francois Legault mentioned Echequan in his speech to party faithful at Saturday's conference. We should all keep her in our thoughts, he said, adding that National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is only 2 days away when this took place. This is an opportunity to remember that there's still work to be done toward one, reconciliation, and 2, to work more and more hand in hand. We know that there's systemic racism because our people live through it. This is from, that quote is not from Legault. That is from Ghislain Picard, the chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Quebec, Labrador. He says, I'll continue with the quote. I just didn't want to mislead anybody. We know there is systemic racism because our people live through it. He said, we're hoping that we can find a way to turn the page and move on to another chapter. So, yeah. Lots of work to be done.
Yeah. When the clinic was a mobile clinic was unveiled, Quebec's Indigenous Affairs Minister Yann Lafrenière said that there has been progress since Joyce's death, including changes at the Joliette Hospital and a bill to establish a cultural safety approach in health and social services. But he acknowledges that there's still a lot of work to do. So for people who are trying to see what we've done on our end. Yeah.
Not nearly enough.
Not nearly enough. Now, this bill that I was mentioning that's going through the House, that would outlaw attempts to deny or downplay the harms caused by Canada's residential schools has been proposed, again, by Leah Gazan. NDP MP Leah Gazan. I'm telling you, people, you got a good one here. This is what a constituency-based MP does.
Yes.
There are 338 MPs in the House. She's with the fourth party, and this is like the sixth or seventh initiative that she's either been a part of or has spearheaded herself, in which we mention her name in the past 2 years or so, 2 or 3 years or so. Pierre Poilievre has been in Parliament for 20 years. He passed one piece of legislation.
Single piece.
That ended up destroying his party. How is Leah Gazan more productive than Pierre Poilievre?
Because she's not trying to rule people. She's trying to govern for them.
That's the difference.
I need to show you something here.
Hold on a second. I want to finish this subject here before we move.
This is directly related to the subject. Go ahead.
The bill?
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Leah Gazan, new Democratic MP for Winnipeg Centre, introduced a private member's bill in the House of Commons on Thursday to add residential school denialism to the criminal code. Quote, if the government is serious about reconciliation, then they need to protect survivors and their families from hate. The residential school system was a genocide designed to wipe out Indigenous cultures, languages, families, and heritage. To downplay, deny, or justify it is cruel, harmful, and hateful. Gazan told CBC News in February 2023 that she was drafting legislation to outlaw attempts to deny the history of residential schools or make false assertions about the institutions. If passed, C-413 would make it a criminal code offense to willfully promote hatred against Indigenous people by condoning, denying, justifying, or minimizing the facts about residential schools. Justice Minister Arif Virani's office did not say whether the federal government supports the move. Quote, we thank MP Leah Gazan for raising an important issue through her private member's bill, said spokesperson Chantal Aubertin. We look forward to reviewing the details of this bill as it is considered in Parliament. The Conservatives have not yet taken a position on the bill either, but if we judge by the minions, it seems they have. In a statement issued to CBC News, Conservative Crown Indigenous Relations critic Jamie Schmal called the residential school system a dark chapter in Canada's history. Quote, common sense conservatives will continue to work to end the paternalistic Ottawa knows best approach that led to these destructive policies in the first place, Schmal said. We are committed to supporting and empowering Indigenous peoples to take back control of their lives. We will closely examine the bill that has just been tabled and participate in debate should it come to the floor of the House. And that is why we didn't vote for UNDRIP.
UNDRIP, for those of you who are unfamiliar with what that acronym means, because it does not mean stop dripping. It stands for United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
Yes. But they're committed to supporting and empowering Indigenous peoples.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
They voted against it.
Yeah. In 2008, former Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper delivered an official apology on behalf of the Canadian government that acknowledged the horrors of the institutions. From roughly 1883 until 1997, more than 150,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children were forced to attend government-funded, church-run residential schools. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission found many children at the schools were subject to physical and sexual abuse. It described conditions as institutionalized child neglect. And the sentence I just read before that, right? From roughly 1883 until 1997, more than 150,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children were forced to attend government-funded and church-run residential schools. And the reason I want you to remember this specifically is because one of the strategies the residential school denialism people say or use, if they're not denying it, they say, well, Canada didn't do this. The church did it. It was government funded. Canada did this. All right. The commission said the federal government created the institutions for the purpose of separating Indigenous children from their families and indoctrinating them into the dominant Euro-Christian Canadian culture. The goal, said the commission, was to weaken Indigenous family ties and cultural linkages. Métis National Council President Cassidy Caron praised Gazan's bill. During a visit to the Vatican in 2022, Caron asked the Roman Catholic Church to declare residential school denialism a violation of canon law, but did not receive any follow-up. Quote, the harm that it does to residential school survivors who are still with us today and their children and grandchildren, it is hate speech towards those people, Caron said. It's unfair. They too are Canadian citizens and they deserve to be protected by Canadian law.
This isn't ancient history, remember, folks. The last school was closed in 1996.
Yeah. Mr. Grizzly, you said that you had something?
Yes, and I think it's important to highlight this because we spoke about it as there is an election taking place in the province of British Columbia. And a certain individual, John Rustad,
Glad.
BC Conservatives want Indigenous rights law UNDRIP repealed. Chief pushes back. This was yesterday at 10:28 a.m. on via the Canadian Press. So John Rustad, Brian Brigette, who's made derogatory remarks about Indigenous people and claimed to be a white nationalist, and Sheldon Clare suggesting residential schools created opportunities for Indigenous children, are all residential school deniers.
Interesting.
So something to think about.
Yeah. So that's from Global here, I'm guessing. Now, if you're wondering what UNDRIP is, other than just the name, the law, quote, well, the Terry TG, the regional chief of BC Assembly of First Nations, says the law fundamentally changed the relationship between First Nations and the province. Quote, rather than having some sort of consultation, right now we're actually talking about shared decision-making, TG said in an interview. John Rustad threw his support behind the legislation as a member of the official opposition BC Liberal Party. But as the BC Conservative leader, he has since signaled his intention to repeal the law if his party wins the October 19th provincial election. Rustad said in a statement on the Conservatives' website last February that the UN declaration known as UNDRIP was, quote, established for conditions in other countries, not Canada. TG said Rustad was creating enemies with First Nations. Quote, as we come to September 30th, he's repealing in a way reconciliation, TG said in an interview ahead of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Quote, he's undoing a lot of the good work that many people in this province have worked towards. BC's legislation adopts the declaration as the framework for reconciliation and charts a path for the province to negotiate agreements with First Nations aimed at establishing shared decision-making in their territories. It has led to changes in provincial laws related to land management, including mining and forestry, and it has helped facilitate progress in returning jurisdiction to First Nations over the welfare of their children, TG said. Unraveling the nearly 5-year-old legislation would set reconciliation back in British Columbia, he said, leaving First Nations without a forum to hold constructive discussions about the recognition of land rights and shared decision-making with the province. Quote, I think it would bring us back to 40 years ago, maybe even longer, when the first court cases began by the Niska and Calder, he said, referring to a landmark case that led to the Supreme Court of Canada recognizing Aboriginal title in 1973. Quote, if we're at odds with each other, then many First Nations will continue to do what they did before, which was go to court, he said. It leaves a lot of uncertainty. The Canadian Press requested an interview with Rustad related to his stance on BC's declaration legislation, but did not receive follow-up to arrange a call. Of course they did not. Conservative candidate Alia Warbus, a member of the Stolo Nation, said asking Rustad about the declaration was, quote, top of mind when she first met him. Quote, what the heck? Why would he take this legislation? We fought hard in Indigenous communities for our rights and recognition of those rights and upholding social determinants of health in our communities, and this legislation helps us do that. But Wabus, who was running in Chilliwack Cultus Lake, said she was really satisfied with her conversation with Rustad. She said Rustad, quote, explained that adopting an international framework such as UNDRIP wasn't the right fit for BC's context, with more than 200 unique First Nations and vast traditional territories that aren't covered by treaties. Warbus said BC's declaration legislation is 97% good, but the application of free, prior, and informed consent had not been settled in the province. Okay. She pointed to conflict over the Coastal GasLink pipeline in northwestern BC. Opposition among Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs to the 670-kilometer pipeline sparked rallies and rail blockades across Canada in 2020, while the elected council of the Wet'suwet'en First Nation and others nearby had agreed to the project. Quote, that was a key example of how free, prior, informed consent without definition doesn't tell us who gets to make that decision at the end of the day, Warbus said. The 670-kilometer pipeline was mechanically completed in November 2023, and an update posted to the project website in June says the focus had turned to the safe operations of the pipeline system, as well as cleanup and reclamation work. Quote, there's no impetus from me or the party to go backwards on reconciliation at all, said Warbus, whose father is a former BC Lieutenant Governor Stephen Point. The switch in Rustad's stance on the declaration came as he was speaking out against proposed changes to BC's Land Act, which have since been scrapped. The Conservative statement last February starts by saying the changes were an assault on private property rights and the right to access share crown land. Quote, Conservatives will defend your rights to outdoor recreation and your water access, as well as BC's mining, forestry, agricultural sectors, and every other land use right, said the statement posted by Rustad. A provincial consultation presentation said the proposed changes would have opened the door for shared decision-making under the Land Act, but nothing would require the province to enter into such an agreement with a First Nation. Quote, the public interest will be a critical part of any provincial government decision to enter into a negotiation of an agreement, the slide deck said. The BC government announced later in February it was dropping the plan. At the time, the Minister of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship, Nathan Cullen, issued a statement saying, quote, some figures had gone to extremes to knowingly mislead the public about what the proposed legislation would do. Cullen said he spoke with many people during the consultation process who, quote, were surprised to learn that the claims being made were not true and that there would be no impacts to tenures, renewals, private properties, or access to Crown land. BC Indigenous leaders, including TG, have said Rustad was making false statements about the province's plan and stoking anti-Indigenous sentiment. In an interview, TG said Rustad was engaging, quote, in fear-mongering and using First Nations as a, quote, wedge issue for political gain ahead of the election. Quote, I don't think he can be trusted. Rustad led the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation in Christy Clark's Liberal government, so he really has no excuse. No. The department was then called Aboriginal Relations, and his statement in February says he signed 435 agreements with First Nations during his tenure as minister. Quote, through this economic reconciliation, we saw First Nations communities rise up from impoverished conditions and truly begin to thrive, the statement says. TG, however, says many of the First Nations leaders who signed an agreement during that time would have, quote, plugged their nose and signed them. Quote, some of those First Nations signed them under duress and put that in their agreement themselves. I know my nation did, stating that this wasn't accommodation, said TG, a member of the Talca Nation in northern BC, who's previously served as tribal chief of the Carrier-Sikani Tribal Council. When asked about criticism of Rustad by other Indigenous leaders, Warbus said, quote, it's all the more reason to work with him, all the more reason to be directly involved. Huh?
Yeah.
I feel strongly that Indigenous people need to be inside, involved on the ground at the legislature level, and that's why I'm doing this, she added. This is the second thing. There's probably more that John Rustad has suddenly flipped on. He's now has an issue with stuff related to vaccines and regrets having taken them now that 3 of them may potentially have saved his life. And now a bill he enthusiastically signed when he was part of the government is now 5 years later, something he has found a reason to repeal.
Mm-hmm.
just as an election is coming.
Remember that when you go to the ballot box, folks.
His word
wants to
isn't
present
worth
himself
much.
as a good man, but his actions would betray that.
Well, it seems that his word doesn't have much value. Now, again, maybe he did believe all that stuff when he got, and somewhere in the last, since his first booster, he went down the rabbit hole.
Well,
It seems that it's a rather quick trip.
remember the whole bit with Guy Felicella, right? He told Guy, "Yeah, I'm here," and then turned around and said, "No, I'm not doing any of that." Basically,
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing, of course, but that's basically what took place. So this guy's word is meaningless. I mean, it's meaningless. I would say he's not a good man, judging by his actions or inactions, whichever case you would like to adjust there. I would say he's not a good man. So, friends in British Columbia, be aware of who this man is.
Jeez. Seriously, man.
Yeah.
Ugh. Unbelievable. God. I'm sorry. I'm so stunned. Why? This guy.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't understand. How do all your values just change seemingly overnight like this?
Whichever way the wind is blowing on that particular day, I guess. Whoever he seems to be somebody who has.
He's got a little bit of J.D. Vanceism.
Yeah. He just wants to get into power, and he'll say or do anything to get there. By the looks of it,
is it because he's been in the legislature since 2005?
I don't know.
I mean,
wants the big chair, I guess.
Dude, it's been a good run.
Yeah.
Again, when is it enough? When is it enough? But either he took the slip and slide down the rabbit hole, or somebody made it financially attractive for him to switch his entire. But I just don't understand how you go from I got 3 shots, but now I regret it. This UNDRIP thing is something that we absolutely have to do. No, it doesn't really. It was something that was good for other nations, but not something like ours that has so many First Nations.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, meet you on the street, shake your hand. No, I definitely will not do that. Less than a week later, I'm definitely doing that.
Yeah.
That one has that's a character thing that doesn't have the other two. Take some time to get from one position to the other. The other one, he just said whatever the person he was talking to at the moment needed to be said, wanted to hear, which is a criticism that people have recently made. It seems that he's doing that. Well, Your Honor, Exhibit A, Guy Felicella.
Yeah.
This guy, John Rostad. Ugh. He's I guess we can transition to the BC election. He is not, how can I put it? He is not having a good campaign, but for some reason, it does not seem to be affecting him poll-wise, at least after the first week.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain polls that are indicating that he's even now in first place, which boggles my mind. But there's been other things, according to Luc Lebrun at Press Progress. BC Conservative candidate Sheldon Clare basically is a denialist. He advocated, quote, challenging the myths of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. shared articles disputing residential school numbers, and argued that residential schools actually created positive opportunities for Indigenous children. Yeah. So that's going on for John Rusted. That is not so great. And then it seems that John Rusted has announced that he plans not to enforce the assault rifle ban.
Yeah. Please explain that to me.
Now this
Please
one,
explain why. Like, why would he? Why? What sense does that make?
So there's a clip of him here.
Well, the biggest killer of children in the United States of America in 2024, as it was, I believe, in 2023, 2022, I don't know how far back, but the biggest killer of children in the United States of America today is guns. And he wants to repeal an assault weapons ban? Bro, give your friggin' head a shake, man. Let's watch this clip.
The provincial NDP is raising concerns about the Conservative leader's commitment to enforcing national gun regulations. The provincial NDP is raising concerns about the Conservative leader's commitment to enforcing national gun regulations.
From my perspective, I think that's an overreach by government, and so I will not have any provincial resources being spent on their initiative.
John Rustad was commenting on changes to firearms laws brought in last year. They put new restrictions on handguns and place new restrictions on firearms. Rustad says Ottawa is free to enforce the changes with its own resources, including border guards, but it wouldn't be a priority for provincially controlled law enforcement officers.
I have family, I have friends that work on the front lines of policing every day, and these statements are dangerous to them. They're put in harm's way when we say that these laws are not going to be enforced. We have victims of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, who are put in harm's way when these tools are taken from police officers.
Before entering politics, Baltaj Dillon was an RCMP officer for 30 years in an anti-gang capacity.
So he might have, firsthand knowledge of what assault weapons can do to people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now I've sent you a second one, Mr. Grizzly, because the clip they used of Rustad speaking, they chose a certain little bit of it, but there's a little more.
All right, just give me a second. I'll get it queued up.
So this is courtesy of David Baudouin on his Twitter feed that found that there was a little more.
Can you just elaborate on what you meant and where your party stands when it comes to federal gun laws?
So I think the gun laws that have been brought in by the federal government looking to take away and to seize guns from law-abiding citizens in British Columbia, I think is the wrong approach, especially when you're out in rural BC with people that are there. So from my perspective, I think that's an overreach by government, and so I will not have any provincial resources being spent on their initiative. If they want to go ahead, fill their boots, but that's not something that, from a province's perspective, we would spend any resources doing.
Can you just elaborate on what you meant and where?
Government's coming for your guns.
I cut myself self-shaving, by the way. That's what that is. It's yeah.
Yeah, kids are wondering if Mr. Grizzly had something on his face.
There's not something on my face. I cut myself shaving.
Yes. Somebody asked previously, by the way, I just remembered because I saw it quite quickly, if whether or not I was Indigenous. Genetically, there is Indigenous blood in my ancestry, both on my father and mother's side, according to what my parents have told me. But I was not raised a single day in the culture, and neither were they, I believe. So,
yeah, you may. What you're saying is you may have some DNA, but because you.
Yeah, both my parents are mixed race, so I'm a mutt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have the bloodline, but like you say, you weren't raised in the culture.
Yeah. No, I wasn't raised a single day in the culture. So, I mean, on my father's side, it would probably be Mi'kmaq
Mm.
from Nova Scotia. And for my mother's side, it would probably be Huron because it's in the Maniwaki area. Saint Cecile de Macham, that area. But yeah, so I think my mother told me stories of her grandmother, who I believe was at least half Indigenous. And on my father's side, it's when I went to ask him, we're black from where? And then he turned around and says, oh, we're Indigenous. What? So I don't know how much on my father's side, I never even met my grandparents. So I don't know. The knowledge of my family stops with my dad, and well, my parents separated before I was born, so it's not like I really knew them. So I really have no idea of my family history, to be totally honest. That's just of the little snippets. But I mean, I was born in Montreal and raised in Ottawa, and with my mom, and bounced in and out of foster homes. So I mean, if there's anything Indigenous about me, it's a little bit of DNA somewhere, and that's about it. Yeah. So yeah, I have no claims. Yes, but I think we should put together a 23andMe fund for Douglas. Yeah, I can imagine doing that, and it's like, oh yeah, Indigenous, French, English, Jamaican, Serbian,
Rastafari,
Mongolian, Laotian. There's probably something weird. There's a show I listen to called The Daily Beans, where they have this thing where, because people can genetically test their dogs to see what breed they are. So they have a game called What the Mutt, and then people send in the pictures, and then the hosts try to guess what it is. And it seems that over time they've discovered that pretty much 80% of dogs have a little chow chow in them, or chihuahua. It seems they get around. So they always say, like terrier, Labrador, and chow chow. Just always throw it in there. So we got one right. Chow chow.
This comment here from Saucy Sea Witch: 23andMe is going bankrupt, and never put your DNA in a private database.
Exactly.
Never. I have always felt the same way. I don't want to hand over my DNA to a private corporation.
Yeah.
That's me. I mean, certainly there's a part of me that would like to know what is my genetic makeup, but I don't want to do it through a private corp.
No.
Now, Ancestry.com, I believe, which I think they're headquartered in Ireland. Apparently, Ireland has the best records kept of any nation on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm told that if you're going to do it, Ancestry is the most trusted one. But again, that's your decision. Certainly, I'm curious to find out what my genetic makeup is, but do I want to hand over my DNA to a private corp? Maybe in a few years when I'm, 65 and I don't give a shit about anything anymore. Once I'm of retirement age, if you will, what are you going to take from me then, right? But in the meantime,
yeah. I'm curious too, but not enough to want to do that.
Yeah.
I'm sure when I get the result, I'm gonna be like standing there, go, Mom, Dad, because absolutely everything about my body is weird. So things are in the wrong spot. I'm a genetic. I don't know what I'm a genetic experiment. Seriously. So.
In other words, we're talking big corps here, right? 23andMe being one of them. Here's another big corp that has recently decided to do business in Canada for a very specific reason. Turn up the volume. Why does the volume keep coming low like that? I don't know. Start that over.
Robin, and how that affects your business?
Absolutely. So in our 2021 announcement, and to this day, our CEO...
This is from Dow Chemicals, by the way.
Has been very clear that the price on carbon is actually one of the reasons why we are investing in Canada. That decarbonization delta is important to ensuring that we can best monetize the investments that we make to reduce these GHG emissions. A market-based system for the trading of carbon credits is one that has been internationally recognized by many different types of economists, and I'd say types of economists very deliberately, because it's not just the Wall Street Journal, it's colleagues like the one to my right who recognize that the carbon is itself an asset.
Carbon and how that affects.
Gee, would you look at that? It's almost like businesses like well-defined boundaries that point in the direction of where the puck is going, stability and predictability. Who knew?
But if, you listen to Pierre Poilievre, nobody's, Canada is just broken, and the carbon tax is just driving up the price of everything. It's just ridiculous. Let me get this straight. If the price of fuel keeps lowering as the price of carbon keeps rising, I'm going to assume that at some point, certain people will figure out that those high grocery costs, utility costs, to mention a few, are the direct result of price gouging. Gas prices in Canada dropped the lowest national average since February. Huh. Isn't that curious? It's like, so the lies that the liar keeps telling us.
We actually have the guy from Dow Chemical says that he's doing business in Canada because we have this.
Yes.
But it's going to be nuclear winter. Yes, because corporations establish themselves in nations where they know nuclear winter is coming, and then go to testify before committee that they like it.
And let's remember here that this is not lip service. This is not lip service at all. These corporations that in many ways, I don't like them, but there's many of them that will not invest in a country that does not have a greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan in place, a carbon tax, a carbon levy. They're literally not going to invest in those countries. And one of the biggest, most powerful corporations in the country, and that is actually their name, Power Corp, is all in on green technology. I mean, they are all in on green technology. And if you don't know who Power Corp is, they're known as the kingmakers. In other words, if they back somebody, they definitely will see that person ascend to the highest office in the land.
Indeed. Interesting. Hopefully there'll be more of that. More corporation CEOs saying that they like the stable environment. That's what we need. If people are not going to listen to the Liberal Party say it, then they need to hear people from the business community saying it. It just seems to me that that's where we're going. The other thing, and this will be particularly salient in British Columbia, of course, given Rustad's bid to flip-flop also on carbon regulatory pricing for the province of British Columbia. The other thing that is interesting that came out is the Conservatives in British Columbia put out a plan to end the housing shortage and bring housing costs under control. For immediate release, Get BC Building. John Rustad unveils bold plan to end housing shortage and bring housing costs under control. September 27th, Surrey, British Columbia. John Rustad, leader of the Conservative Party of British Columbia, today announced a comprehensive plan to tackle BC's housing crisis and restore affordability for British Columbians. The Get BC Building plan promises to end the housing shortage, streamline approval processes, and deliver the largest tax cut on housing in BC's history, dubbed the Rustad Rebate. I don't think it's dubbed anything yet. It hasn't been around and not enough people know about it to actually haven't given it a name. But way to try to make fetch happen, Gretchen. Quote, If you work hard, you should be able to get ahead, but in David Eby's BC, that's no longer the case, said Rustad. The NDP's policy have sent rents and home prices soaring while piling on income taxes that make it impossible for British Columbians to keep up. It's time for immediate relief. The Rustad rebate, the largest housing tax cut in BC's history. So it's interesting now he believes in rebates.
Yeah, funny how that works.
But I digress. The Conservative Party's plan includes immediate tax relief starting in Budget 2026 with the Rustad rebate, BC rent and mortgage rebate. The rebate will remove BC income taxes from $3,000 per month on housing costs, including rent, mortgage interest, and strata fees, offering significant relief to both renters and homeowners. We're in a housing crisis and it's time to act with urgency, Rustad emphasized. The Rustad rebate will give people immediate financial relief and help them stay in the homes they love. Well, that's not exactly true.
Well, let's stick with housing
Because
here for a second.
if it's tax thing, well, then you're going to have to go through all of 2026 and then file your taxes. And
Yeah.
then when you get your first rebate, it'll be sometime in 2027. So it's not exactly immediate relief. And the other thing is that, remember, given that it's a tax credit, you only get 5.06% of that $3,000 per month. So you're not saving $36,000 off your taxes, but 5.06% of that. And that's only if you declared enough taxes to cover that. Because if you haven't, then you get nothing.
I'll just comment here from Pierre Poilievre. 9 years of NDP Liberals, which used to be Liberal NDP coalition, now he's NDP Liberals, doubled housing costs, and now Canadians can't afford a home. Our common sense plan will bring homes you can afford by selling off federal land so we can build.
Yes.
This is all these people ever do is sell off things that belong to the people.
Yes. And we just saw how selling off public land for housing development has gone in Ontario under Doug Ford, right?
Yeah, exactly. Have we not learned a damn thing, people?
Now, other things of...
Crown land, our land. He wants to sell it off to his developer donor buddies.
Yep. Things of John Rustad's plan here. He says, under the NDP, housing starts are collapsing and bureaucratic delays are preventing necessary development. The Conservative Party's plan will approve homes in months, not years. Rezoning and redevelopment permits will be approved within 6 months and building permits within 3. If cities fail to issue permits within these timelines, the provincial government will step in and issue them. So the party that's against bureaucracy and bloating the public service is going to have to either ship money out to an external agency to do that or actually create a whole bunch of government jobs if they want to achieve that, because getting the approvals done faster doesn't happen without more bodies. Proactive planning. Rustad committed to working with cities to pre-zone areas in advance, eliminating delays caused by rezoning for each individual project, and trust BC professionals. The plan includes a presumption of compliance policy, okay, requiring cities to trust certified and regulated professionals like engineers and architects to do their jobs without unnecessary bureaucratic interference, speeding up housing approvals. Quote, the NDP talks about building homes, but their policies have made it impossible, says Rustad. We will cut the red tape, streamline approvals, and get BC building. Then he complains about something called the STEP code and net zero as being radical. The NDP talks about repealing hidden taxes on housing. Rustad criticized the NDP for increasing construction costs by 30 to 40% through the radical STEP code policy and net zero mandate, which he said also result in cookie-cutter homes with fewer windows and reduced livability. Quote, these hidden taxes are driving up costs and making homes unaffordable. Rustad said, we will immediately repeal these hidden taxes that make it so expensive to build in BC while doing nothing for safety or livability. I'm sorry, kids and cubs, I am not familiar with what the STEP code is. I know that net zero is probably changing in building codes, whatnot, to make sure that the housing that is being built now is more energy efficient and that, generates fewer GHGs. But STEP code, Not a clue. So yeah, there's a lot of things wrong with this plan there, and with since you were mentioning PP's plan, they're talking about it a little bit earlier. Remember that Pierre Poilievre's plan is that he's going to encourage municipalities to do certain things, and if they do not, then he will just pull their funding.
Cut their funding, yeah.
Which will that will go a long way to build new homes.
Yes, that'll work out well. Yes. The big real estate executives among the top donors to Pierre Poilievre's conservative.
Oh, well, what do you know?
Conservative Party's donors list includes names of real estate investors and developers that are buying up affordable housing across Canada. The executives at big real estate companies profiting off and even driving up high real estate prices across Canada are listed as donors to the Federal Conservative Party Elections Canada records show. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has been railing against high real estate prices and presenting himself as the solution to Canada's housing affordability crisis. Yet Poilievre's party also appears to have received financial support from top executives at some of Canada's biggest real estate investment trusts. More lies from the liar in charge. We're going to sell off our lands to... Wait a minute. Remember how you bought stock in General Motors and then sold it at a loss when we could have hung on to it, profited off of it decades later? Remember when you sold off Air Canada and privatized it in 1989, thus making it one of the worst airlines in North America after having been the best? Remember when Brian Mulroney sold off our vaccination manufacturing facilities because there was a profit to be made? So that when the pandemic came along, we had to buy vaccines from other nations because we couldn't manufacture them ourselves. Mm-hmm. Stop selling off our assets. Stop it. Stop it. Yeah. They tell you that they're fiscally conservative and financially responsible, but they are not. They see a profit, they go after it, and damn anybody that gets in their way. And to hell with the consequences. Hey, we made a few bucks. Everybody got paid. Yeah. This is not good policy.
No, not good policy at all. Now, with Rustad as well, the flip on the gun policy, specifically the firearms policy, strikes me as a little weird. Not as sorry, by the gun policy, I mean, to not enforce the assault rifle ban. Because before the writ was drawn for this campaign, analysts were saying that it might come down to the Surrey region specifically. And the Surrey region is where there is a decent amount of gang and gun violence. If that is the decisive battleground, why would you come out as not wanting to enforce an assault rifle ban if you wanted to win?
Yeah.
That's a decision that gets you more votes in the electoral districts that you already are going to win. Which I guess maybe he feels he needs because the race is close. But going into an election when somebody tells you, in the United States, when they say it's probably going to end up being these 3 or 4 battleground states, where they talk Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska, and let's say Pennsylvania, and you're spending all your money in Florida. Not sure what decision you're making strategically. And Mr. Jim says gangs aren't affected by gun bans. Well, no, because gangs will do what they want. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
They're gangs. They're not particularly inclined to follow the law in the first place.
Not the letter, not the spirit, not anything that has to do with any of it.
That's kind of why we call them gangs. Right. So yeah, it could be an action for action's sake type of law. We're passing an assault rifle ban. Okay, well, nobody who wants one's going to want one more now, and those who have them, I mean, there's going to be probably a small percentage of people who like them for whatever purpose that they use them and do use them responsibly and not, and they will be negatively affected by this. And then the people that don't particularly care about laws in the first place are, I mean, it's not like the law doesn't apply to them. There'll probably be stricter penalty if they get caught or something, but it would have to be one heck of a penalty to be some type of incentive to behave differently, which we tend not to do here. Make the disincentivizing enough. Let's put it that way. So yeah. On the housing side, David Eby had came up with some elements of his plan that he says he will build 25,000 middle class. He will build housing for 25,000 middle class families on top of building 300,000 homes, taking action against speculators, breaking down barriers to construction and protecting renters. I'm not sure if there was anything much more than that. Other than I see another post here that says the government would finance 40% of the purchase price for new home buyers. So that's the plan that would affect the 25,000 homes over 5 years at a cost of $1.29 billion per year. It says here, when a buyer sells their home, the 40% provincial contribution is repaid, plus the government gets 40% of the appreciation in the value of the home. So that fund can probably grow in that way. And if the fund grows faster than the market does, well, then over time, that type of fund could help a greater number of people. People are wondering if the federal government hasn't already tried this in 2019. And the program failed from lack of interest because the homeowners weren't keen on joint ownership with the government. I'm not, to be totally honest, I'm not as familiar with how that plan was put in place in 2019, although I do know that the program was indeed put in, and I'm not familiar enough with the program offered by BC and this one to be able to compare them to see if they are the same thing. If it's just a similar idea or if they actually are like similar things in terms of execution or whatnot. Because you can have a program that's a good idea, it was just poorly implemented, and that's why there was no interest. Right. So the idea itself might be good, but with a different implementation process might have a better chance of working. I can't comment on the quality of the criticism in this case. I can just tell you that there is some. I must plead ignorance on that. So that's about what's going on in BC. And for those of you who are interested in BC politics in particular, I believe on Wednesday morning we will be airing a special True North Eager Beaver interview project episode with our friend Tim Krutzman. If you've been with us a while, you've seen him before. He's a teacher in British Columbia who's just very, very engaged and knows a lot about history and BC politics. Yeah, he's a great guy. Often has a good quote or an anecdote or something to come and illustrate or punctuate the point that he is making. So we will have that. So it'll be an issue specifically on politics in British Columbia.
And on tomorrow's show, we will have our friend DK Gray, if you follow him on the Twitter as I do. Dave Gray. And here's a tweet from him from yesterday, which I think is pretty interesting. Yes. He's in Alberta, and we talk Alberta tomorrow and BC on Wednesday. But he says, in light of HPV vaccines totally eliminating cervical cancers in Scottish women, are Alberta Catholics still fighting against vaccinations? Have they instead asked the Lord why he made their brains so smooth and useless? God gave us science. Preachers seem to hate that. Look, he already gave you snazzy clothes and super high ceilings. So what he's talking about here is research has come to light that the HPV vaccines that they've been using for a number of years, has been on the market for a while. And in Scotland, they discovered that the cervical cancer rates have dropped to nil. Now, what his commentary there is the fact that the Alberta Health Services is being handed over to Covenant Health, which is a Catholic-run series of or chain of hospitals and healthcare centers across the province of Alberta, and they deny things like, well, they don't want to give you vaccinations, they don't want to provide IVF, I believe. They won't provide IVF, and they refuse to provide abortion if a woman needs it. So, I wonder if they would provide it if it was her life was in jeopardy.
Hmm.
Because that often is the case where it's like, no, we have to do this right now, or you will die.
Right.
So you got to wonder. But the thing is, he's pointing out the hypocrisy of there's, we're not going to do this. It's like, oh, yeah, but if you do this, look at the result.
Yeah, indeed. All right. I guess
I want to address a couple of things here quickly.
Okay, sure.
Before we begin to wrap up. First off, in sad news, Chris Christopherson passed away yesterday. One of my all-time favorite singer-songwriters and actors, the late, great Chris Christopherson. He passed away at the age of 89 yesterday. And on the weekend, I went to Montreal for a concert. And there was a bit of a comedy of errors, to say the least. So purchased my ticket for the concert, purchased a train ticket, and booked a hotel a few days back. Then Bridget wanted to come, but her children were supposed to be here this weekend, and then plans got changed, and her daughter won't see her until today, and her son doesn't arrive till Wednesday. So she's like, I think I'd like to come with you. I'm like, okay. So she managed to get a train ticket, and we met at the train station, rode the train down together. Just as we're pulling into the station in Montreal, I decide to look at my booking for the hotel that I've booked on booking.com, because it was a smoking deal. I got a room for $88 all in, like smoking deal, right? I thought, Montreal, 80, holy crap, this is going to be amazing. And I looked at this. It's a small little inn. It's an auberge, and pictures look amazing. And I'm scrolling down. I get to the very bottom, and the last line says, a bed in a dorm room for 6 women. I went, what? I'm like, that can't be right. My photo is of this face, block shadow, and a hat on. My photo on the app. And my name is Paul Atkinson. Look at this, and I'm like, that's not right. And I hand my phone to Bridget, and she looks at it, and she starts chuckling, and then she's like, oh, wait a minute, that's a problem. I'm like, yeah. So she calls them, and they're like, yeah, there's nothing we can do. Well, so what if we show up? Well, we wouldn't let you in. Well, yeah. So I immediately canceled it, and then was in a mad scramble to find a hotel in Montreal as we were arriving. And I did find a few rooms, but they were all in the $500 and up range, which I'm sorry, not happening.
Right.
So find a like probably the last room in the city that was within an affordable price range. It was about $180. So it was $100 more than I intended to spend. But it ended up spending $180 plus the $88 because I'm out that money. And I'm going to have to fight with booking.com to get my money back because of the fact that I'm like, excuse me, why did you allow this to happen? I did not see that on the system anywhere that said it was a dorm room. It just said a room. So, yeah, bit of a mad panic, and we were able to find something at the last minute. Checked in. It was a small room in an older building, but the room was clean. The bathroom had been redone top to bottom not that long ago. The bed was comfortable. It was a tiny room, but we got a good night's sleep after the concert. We had gone down to see Extreme with special guest Living Colour. So it was a great double bill at M. Telus, formerly Metropolis, for those of you who might be familiar with the old name. And met up with some friends. We were on the floor really close and had a great time. It was a good weekend, but let's just say when we landed in Montreal, we took the train, but landed in Montreal, there was some complication. A little bit of stress, but managed to work it out and met some wonderful people who were very accommodating and helped us. And the guy at the hotel, when I checked in, I told him what happened. He goes, yeah, that happens a lot here in Montreal because a lot of hotels also have hostel style annexes on them. And sometimes on the website, it's not explicit that that's what you're booking, because you think you're getting a great deal and you show up and it's like, wait a minute, this is not what I booked. So yeah, that was a bit of a complication to the weekend, to say the least. But like I said, we did meet some wonderful people. I'd like to give a special shout out to the attendant Fanny at Via Rail here in Ottawa at the Ottawa station, who was able to get Bridget a ticket at the last minute and actually booked us to seat together there and back. And we were on the same train there and the same train back. So it all worked out well in the end. But it was some efforts of some really good people who did a lot of work to help us out. And the guy at the hotel was really super accommodating. And he kept apologizing. He goes, "The room is really small. I'm really sorry. If you come and stay with us again, I'll put you in the biggest room next time." I'm like, dude, we got the last room in the city. I'm happy to have a place. Now, I do have family in Montreal. So if I had been super stuck, we could have done that. But they live, so the concert M. Telus is on St. Catherine Street. So it's right downtown. And my family lives in Pointe-aux-Trembles, which is the northeastern tip of the island of Montreal. So that is about a 40-minute drive, which would be a very expensive Uber ride back and forth. So, you start doing the math and the inconvenience of it. It's like, just get the room downtown. It's cheaper in the long run, right?
Right.
So anyway, yeah, a good weekend in the end, but a little bit of complications there.
Okay.
And then the last thing is the Foreign Interference Commission.
Okay.
Well, no, I'm not diving into it. I just wanted to make a comment that it's ongoing, and the stream should be online. I'm going to put the link in the chat here for those of you who would like to watch it later. That's all. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Cool. The one thing that we do have to talk about, because like I said, there was it was relatively slow news for Canada, but internationally, big news. Basically, out in the whole Middle East area,
Yeah.
and basically it's Lebanon in particular. They're facing the most intense bombing that they have in 20 years. And it seems that the bombing has eliminated the commander and communicator in chief of Hezbollah, who is one of the Middle East's most influential figures, most confidant of the supreme leader of Iran. And the bombing has been so intense that many of the citizens and residents have fled to Syria, despite the fact that there's civil war going on there. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant called it, quote, "the most important targeted strike since the founding of Israel." The senior military leadership of Hezbollah is considered to be somewhat decimated. And Hezbollah is considered to be much more powerful than Hamas in the region. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine says that 3 of its leaders were killed following another airstrike in Lebanon. Hamas says its leader in Lebanon is also dead. That would be Fatah Sharif Abu El-Amin. And the first strikes to take place in Lebanon in this capital city of Beirut since the last war also happened. Canadian ambassador to the United Nations, Bob Ray, said it's not just his killing, but the fact that many other Hezbollah leaders have been killed have been really a huge setback for Hezbollah and for Iran and for Hamas. From a military perspective, things have changed quite significantly. So the Netanyahu government has assassinated the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, through airstrikes. Iran's supreme leader says that his death will not go unavenged, as they were close. They were confidants. President Biden calls Nasrallah's death a measure of justice, as he was responsible for killing hundreds of Americans as well as Israeli and Lebanese civilians. Defense Minister Bill Blair has deployed 200 soldiers to Lebanon and Cyprus should a major evacuation be needed. The government of Canada is booking blocks of seats on commercial flights. The Canadian and Australian governments have rented a cruise ship together, as Lebanon borders only Israel and Syria, which makes an overland escape rather impossible. Melanie Joly said, Bill Blair said, it would enable us to move people out of the region, but there's a limit to how many we can move at any one time. So the safest thing to do if you are in the area is to leave as soon as possible on commercial flights. Airports are still open, but could close anytime, and there are many flights that are being canceled as people are getting there and they're finding out. Netanyahu says that the assassination was necessary and signals a historic turning point. Many Lebanese will not be sad that Hassan is dead, but he was an important and revered figure for many Shia Muslims. He turned the Iran-backed Party of God into a state within a state in Lebanon, and its militia is more powerful than Lebanon's own national army. Lebanon's politics have been divided along sectarian lines since the 1940s and was further entrenched during the country's long civil war from 1975 to 1990. So those bombs that fell in Beirut have been the first ones since at least 1990. The Lebanese Health Ministry says that greater than 1,000 people have been killed by Israel attacks in the last 2 weeks, among them 2 Lebanese Canadians from Ottawa. Canada's ambassador to Lebanon, Stephanie McCollum, says the embassy in Beirut remains open and is helping Canadians who want to leave. Quote, if you are in Lebanon, leave now. Do not put yourself in an emergency situation where you would require our assistance. Government evacuations are an option of last resort. There are an estimated 40,000 Canadians in Lebanon, but only half of them have registered with the embassy. McCollum says that those who are not able or willing to leave should prepare to take shelter in place for long periods of time and stock up on emergency supplies, medication, food, and water. As we mentioned, several Canadians have been having difficulty leaving by commercial means as many flights are being cancelled. Global Affairs Canada is aware of the situation and is in constant communication with Middle East Airlines and is passing on information about flight departures to Canadian citizens and permanent residents in Lebanon. This is not an evacuation at the moment, so those leaving must pay for their own transportation and accommodations. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says that her staff and Canada's military are making contingency plans. Quote, we are working with the Australians, the Americans, and also the French governments because what we've learned from the evacuation of 2006, when Canada evacuated 15,000 Canadians from Lebanon, we leased ships to bring them to Cyprus and Turkey at a cost of $94 million, by the way. So she said, what we learned is that we cannot compete for spaces at the port. We need to be organized all together. International Development Minister Ahmad Hussein announced Canada is providing $10 million for humanitarian aid to Lebanon. The money is for the urgent needs of civilians. That includes food, water, and emergency health care. Now, if you're wondering who is Hassan Nasrallah, for 3 decades, he basically helped build Hezbollah. So he's been in charge for 3 decades. It's a significant figure when we're talking about here.
But this is a mistake by Nasrallah because of the fact that even though this was a bad man who Netanyahu, sorry, okay. Netanyahu, my apologies, because even though this is a bad man who did bad things, over the last number of years, he had become very much a reductionist, if you will. I'm looking for a better term. That's not the correct term, but he was less radical, number one, and number two, he was kind of like, let's just let sleeping dogs lie.
Okay.
I'm not giving this man any sort of praise, but this is what I've been told by people who are in the know, who work in this field, who have said, this is not good because Hezbollah had nothing to do with the Hamas attack.
Right.
Because the last time Hezbollah attacked, Israel responded 50-fold, and Hezbollah went, oh, I didn't know it was going to be like that. We're just going to leave. We're just going to leave things be. They've been staying out of this. So what Netanyahu has done is stepped in it. We're going to have a full-scale war in the Middle East.
Yep. It's almost
Netanyahu just trying to stay out of jail because once his term is up, he's going to prison.
I think he's really trying to provoke Iran to get into it because that way he can get full commitment from the United States at that point.
I think that's part of his plan. Yes.
Yeah.
But Yemen is also in it now too.
Yep. Yeah.
And Lebanon's caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, and that can affect the Strait of Hormuz and a whole bunch of shipping routes now, and that'll raise the costs of a lot if that happens, because all the shipping will have to go around the world under the Cape of Good Hope to get around.
Yeah, this is all just bad for everyone globally.
For everyone.
Globally.
Yeah.
Like when the war started in Ukraine, when Russia illegally invaded a sovereign nation and declared war, we said at the time, this is going to affect us globally because of the fact that they're the breadbasket for Europe. And not just Europe, but also the breadbasket for many African nations. Most of the grain in Lebanon comes from Ukraine.
Mhm.
Those shipments have restarted, thankfully, but it was touch and go there for a while.
Yep. So Hassan Nasrallah, for 3 decades, helped build Hezbollah. His death is a major blow for the group, which is considered a terrorist organization by the Canadian government.
Oh, yes. I'm not questioning that. That's
Yep,
not
yep.
up for debate.
Yep. Lebanon's prime minister called for a minute of silence to honor him, then declared 3 days of national mourning. Iran is Hezbollah's largest international backer, and it declared 5 days of national mourning. The supreme leader says that, as I mentioned before, Nasrallah's death will not go unavenged. Nasrallah joined the group in its infancy back in the 80s and became leader in 1992. He grew the organization not only in terms of military strength, but as a provider of social services to the people following the Israeli occupation. So Hezbollah has a militant military and has a political wing, which is what makes it harder to sort of get rid of or to destroy, because in many ways it has endeared itself to many people within Lebanon by providing these types of social services that were not there before. It is considered a terrorist organization in many Western countries, including Canada. Hezbollah has one of the largest arsenals of rockets in the world. That's why we're saying it's more powerful than Hamas. That's one of the reasons. To devout followers, Nasrallah was a savior. Ruby Deiger, an assistant professor of international development and global studies at the University of Ottawa, says, quote, "They saw him to be somebody who was really their guide, was really their father, was really their leader, who really wanted to take care of them. So he brought that charisma forward. Contrary to other leaders, Hezbollah equals Nasrallah." Sajjan Gol, the international security director at the Asia Pacific Foundation, says, quote, "It's not a seismic blow, but it is a setback. It's also a humiliation. The fact that Hezbollah wasn't able to protect its leader, the fact that Iran, that is the major sponsor of Hezbollah, wasn't able to help. And I don't think there's going to be any urgency by the group to announce its leadership until they've had proper consultations with Iran." So that's a little bit what's going on there. The U.S. is trying to do its best to make sure that there isn't a regional war, but like I said, it seems that Netanyahu really wants one. A couple of other little things before we go, kits and cubs. When I was talking about the Bloc Québécois plan to boost the OAS to the same rates it had been boosted for Canadians 75 and older, for Canadians 65 to 74. I mentioned it was a $16 billion plan. It's not a $16 billion per year. It seems that they did it as a 5-year-ish sort of cost. So the cost to the Canadian Treasury for doing the move will be about $3 to $3.5 billion additionally per year, not $16 billion per year. So I just wanted to clarify that because that wasn't clear, I think, when I mentioned it before. Another gentle correction I wanted to put on myself is I mentioned the other day when I was talking about every vote matters that the state house in Pennsylvania had flipped and gone Democrat. That was also actually incorrect. It had been Democrat before. It had flipped in the last election, I believe. So they retained it. But there were 2 seats for by-election, so they could have lost it because the lead was just 1. But turns out they were relatively safe ridings, and it seems that both of them actually won by acclamation because nobody ran against them. So when I was reading it at first, it seemed that there was a real chance that it could flip back. And as I found out more, I was like, oh no, it was just it had been like that, and it's basically status quo. So it wasn't a flip. As Mr. Grizzly mentioned, Chris Christopherson, legendary country singer, passed away. A lot of people might not know this about him, but he was also a Rhodes Scholar.
Yes, I did
Went
know
to
that.
Oxford. A former soldier. He won 3 Grammys.
Was he a Green Beret or a Ranger? I can't remember.
A Ranger, I believe.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly what I read, he was a Ranger. He won 3 Grammys, won a Golden Globe for his role in the 1976 version of A Star is Born. His family said he died peacefully at his home in Maui, Hawaii. He was 88. Dolly Parton describes it as a great loss. Barbra Streisand says he was something special. And some people might not know that, but before he became a star himself as a singer, he was wrote songs for other people. So some songs that he wrote that you might not know have been written by him are Help Me Make It Through the Night.
Mm-hmm. Me and Bobby McGee.
Me and Bobby McGee.
And Sunday Morning Coming Down, which is, I think, the most poignant song ever written about alcoholism and depression.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. The world also lost another giant of entertainment, Dame Maggie Smith, one of my favorite actresses.
I was familiar with a lot of her work, but I wouldn't say I was a big fan, but I was familiar with her work. I thought she was a very talented performer.
Yeah. Stars of movies such as The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, California Suites, Sister Act, The Harry Potter Suite, A Room with a View, and the hit television series Downton Abbey. She died at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in London on the 27th of September at the age of 89. King Charles III released a statement, quote, "As the curtain comes down on a national treasure, we join all those around the world in remembering with the fondest admiration and affection her many great performances and her warmth and wit that shone through both on and off the stage." She was praised by UK's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who described Smith as a national treasure. Figures in the entertainment industry who also paid tribute to Smith included her Sister Act co-star Whoopi Goldberg, who described her as, quote, "a great woman and a brilliant actress. I still can't believe I was lucky enough to work with the one of a kind." Her Harry Potter co-star Daniel Radcliffe, who played Harry Potter, of course, released a statement reading in part, quote, "I will always consider myself amazingly lucky to have been able to work with her. The word legend is overused, but if it applies to anyone in our industry, then it applies to her." Emma Watson, also from the Harry Potter series, said, "She was real, honest, funny, and self-honoring. Thank you for all your kindness. I will miss you." And Dame Helen Mirren, who co-starred with her in Gosford Park, compared her to Queen Elizabeth II, saying, "Like the Queen, she has been a part of my life since I was a student, and she was an icon even then," adding that she was one of the greatest actresses of the past century. She won 2 Academy Awards for Best Actress for The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie and Best Supporting Actress for California Suite, was nominated 6 times. 5 BAFTA Awards, those are the British Oscars. 4 Emmy Awards, 3 Golden Globe Awards, and a Tony Award. By winning the Oscar, the Tony, and the Emmy, she is one of the few performers in the world to earn the triple crown of acting. She was also nominated for 6 Olivier Awards, which are the stage ones in Great Britain. So yeah, famous through, the prime of Miss Jean Brodie was 1970, right? Her first Oscar. We're 2024, so a long career, and like I said, very, very respected, and she could do it all. Right, she could do she was an actress. She appeared on Stratford stage. It's claimed that she actually saved Stratford the couple of seasons that she did there. She's respected Shakespearean actress, but like I said, was able to do comedy. There are clips going around with her on the Carol Burnett show, teaching Carol Burnett how to do a Cockney accent, and she's utterly delightful. She's just utterly delightful. 2 other little things. It's funny because it didn't make as much news as you'd think it would. But Francis Fox, former senator and cabinet minister, passed away at the age of 84. This was from CBC on the 25th. He was a former senator and cabinet minister in Trudeau, the father's government. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says in a statement announcing the death that Fox was a lawyer who was first elected as a member of parliament in Quebec in 1972, served under his father as Solicitor General, Minister of Communications, and Secretary of State for Canada. He was forced to temporarily resign from cabinet in 1978 after acknowledging in public that he had forged the signature of his girlfriend's husband on a hospital form so she could get an abortion. There's a little bit of history.
Yeah.
For you. Trudeau says Fox's contribution in 12 years serving Parliament included introducing the Landmark Access to Information Act and overseeing the creation of Telefilm Canada. That alone is a legacy.
Yeah, no kidding.
Fox was appointed to the Senate in 2005 and resigned on December 2nd, 2011, his 76th birthday, citing personal and family reasons for leaving 3 years before the end of his term. Quote, Francis left an indelible mark on Canadian politics, Trudeau said in the statement. Today we remember him and the legacy he leaves behind. On behalf of all Canadians, I offer my condolences to his family and friends. And along with that, and it didn't make a lot of news, but the Prime Minister also named another senator. So that's 5 in the last few weeks. But Suze Yuance was appointed to the Canadian Senate. She immigrated to Canada from Haiti in 2006. It's amazing how he sometimes does this really subtly, doesn't he? Considering everything that's going on in the United States right now. Hey, there's a Senate seat open for Quebec. Why not name a Haitian immigrant?
Well, I think it's appropriate.
Hey, now, I'm not saying that she hasn't earned it.
No.
Because she's clear, but that is a smooth freaking move.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
She's a civil engineer who grew up in Haiti. She will sit as an independent in the upper chamber. She immigrated to Canada from Haiti in 2006, having spent more than a decade on Canadian aid projects based out of Port-au-Prince. She settled in Montreal, where she taught at l'École de Technologie Supérieure, a public research university that specializes in the field of engineering. She's also the president of the Haitian Community Office in Montreal, which provides family, academic, immigration, and other support. She's the 76th senator appointed since Trudeau took office in 2015. So just an interesting little political message there, kids and cubs. There is some labor stuff to watch out for. There might be a strike being announced for the ports of Montreal. They said if there was no deal by today, that 2 terminals in the port will be shut down for 3 days. 72-hour notice had been given, I believe, on Friday. Other reports say that the port will be shut down for 4 days to try to pressure something going on. And there seems to be a bigger port strike looming in the United States. There are 14 ports on the east and Gulf coasts that could grind to a halt tomorrow. And that port strike would impact greater than $2 billion worth of goods every day, including 2/3 of all U.S. container ships and about half of all imports. About 25,000 workers are prepared to walk off the job there, fighting for wage increases and protection against automation. It doesn't seem for the American one that the ports on the West Coast are going to be affected by it. There'll be some news about that stuff coming out today, whether they will or they will not. And finally, in British Columbia, there were some tactical evacuations underway in the Christina Lake region on Sunday due to an out-of-control wildfire. The Kootenay Boundary Regional District issued an emergency alert for about 42 homes. The order has since been downgraded to an alert applying to a handful of the properties. All right, Mr. Grizzly, do we have a show?
We do indeed, sir.
All right. We have Dan asking if Dame Maggie Smith was the lady from Titanic. No, that was Gloria Stewart, a legendary, I believe, Broadway actress.
I think.
I believe, who hadn't worked in quite a long time, and then, but Steven Spielberg had heard about her and cast her, and she won her. I think she earned her first Academy Award nomination in her career at. I think in her 80s.
I don't know.
I think it might have been. But for her role in Titanic. Kids and Cubs, that's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you liked listening to us because we liked making this for you. Now, remember that sharing is caring and word of mouth is priceless. So please tell your peeps and poops all about us. We love it when you do that. Now, if you'd like to not miss an episode, you don't have to, thanks to the Ray Girl, because she sponsored our pod page. So if you scan that QR code that's appeared under my chin, podpage.com/thetruenortheagerbeaver, lowercase letters with a hyphen between each one of those words. You go there, you click subscribe. We come directly to you when we have something fresh off the bandwidth. It's really that simple. Now, if you'd like to support us in other ways, then you need to make like Kit Elaine and surf yourself on down to the True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube page where we have some buttons waiting for you. Like, share, subscribe, click 1, click 2, click 3. Make us happy. We like it when you do that too. Thank you so very much. And if you would like to help us in other ways, the QR code by Mr. Grizzly's Head will bring you to our coffee page. It's the last day of the month, so if you want to show us some love, help us pay some bills, we would be grateful for any help and assistance that you can give us. That's where you will find our tip jar. So if you leave us a little bit of coinage there, a little pat on the head, say, attaboys, that would mean the world to us. That's coffee, ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver, lowercase letters, all in one word. We appreciate your generosity and your encouragement. Now, if you're not able to support us financially, don't worry, man. It's all good. The gift of your attention and participation is the one that matters most to us, and we love to hear from you. So write us at truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com. Write us on our Twitter feed at TrueEager, our Facebook page, True North Eager Beaver, or if you happen to be listening on YouTube, well, then leave us a comment right down there. If you're listening to us on podcast, Apple Podcast, for example, leave us some stars and some reviews. That really helps us. And of course, kids, if you have had some yummy food or have prepared some yummy food, post it to our Twitter feed with the hashtag KitsuCook or send us some pictures via our email. Again, truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com. We love to see what you're eating. We like to share it. All right. It's kind of my thing. Plus, it gives me some ideas when I need to figure out what. It's not completely altruistic. Because democracy is something that you do. We have some by-elections We have some provincial elections coming up in New Brunswick, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia. So please research your candidates. Please plan your vote. If there's a candidate you're particularly enthusiastic about, why not knock on some doors? Do some stuff to help your candidate win. All right, get involved. Democracy is something that you do. Kids and cubs, it can be a tough world out there, so please be kind to and gentle with yourself. Mr. Grizzly, do you have some words of wisdom, please?
Don't let the bastards get you down.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Take some time today to do something for National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Make the effort to expose yourself to some truth with an open mind, open heart, open soul.
Open mind. That's the big thing. That's really the big thing, is the open mind, the open heart, open soul. Hopefully that is something that's automatic for a lot of people, but the open mind, I think, is the biggest precursor to getting people to understand. Learn. Be open to learning.
It's an important day. And hopefully it becomes more and more important as we go on. And hopefully as we go on, there'll be less and less a need for it.
Yes.
Because I'm pretty sure the Indigenous community would be happy to put itself out of business with regard to this day.
Yes.
One day.
Well, it's much like we talk about pride. It would be great if pride was no longer necessary.
Yeah.
Continue the celebration because it's a good time, but
Yes.
it would be great if it was no longer necessary. It's just as necessary today as it was 50 years ago.
It would be nice if we got to a place of National Day of celebration of being truthful and reconciled.
Yes. Maybe that day will come. Somehow I doubt it'll happen in our lifetime, but I can be hopeful.
If you don't start from a place of hope, you can't arrive at a better destination, right?
True enough. All right, we got to wrap. I got to get this doggy out before she
all right, kids and cubs.
she pees on the floor.
Mr. Grizzly, please cue the cock. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to fill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music.